Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the Ultima monthly licensing webinar with myself, Ian Gerard, on today the 6th of May. Thank you very much for joining. Today we'll be looking and I'll be running through how we can leverage all of the value and benefits from all of your Microsoft licenses with a particular slant on those on-premise licenses that you may have as an organization. So as always, this will be a probably take around 20 to 30 minutes. The session will be recorded. Please do ask questions or note the questions down as we go, or alternatively, you can send them to me or your Ultima account manager or your licensing consultant or specialist who you work with. You can see my contact details there. But I'm sure as we run through this, you may realize that there's going to be a unique scenario for yourself that might be worth looking at with a little more closely. So what I wanted to do today is really run through a lot of those conversations which many customers have when they're looking to kind of move to the cloud or stay on premise. There is that question around, well, how do I leverage all of the benefits? Okay, if it's great if I'm going down the Office 365 path, but I do still have some on-premise requirements, or I might have some legacy licensing, or I might only be, phasing that journey to the cloud journey, but the licensing can kind of work to support you in that way, and that's what I want to address in the webinar today. So we'll be looking at those on-premise rights kind of versus the cloud hybrid rights. I'll run through what license mobility is, what the hybrid use benefit is. I'll run through what we can kind of do at expiry, or that kind of procurement question, and what your options are most crucially there. Finally, I will have a look at some of the new products from Microsoft. There's not a huge amount to talk about as they build towards their end of their financial year in June, which I'll cover off as well briefly, but I'll cover off what Viva, new product Viva is, and other news and updates. And like I say, at the end, there will be an opportunity to ask questions as well. So please feel free to pop your hand up, save them till the end, or ask them as we go. But I wanted to be really clear what I'm going to be covering here, because these are the kind of questions that we're being asked. Sometimes not until the end, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes, these types of things are potentially forgotten in the main bulk of the conversation, which is, hey, which cloud license do I want? How do I want to, when I'm looking at Azure, do I want to do the full platform infrastructure? All of those types of questions. We do need to understand what on-premise rights do I have with my cloud subscriptions, and vice versa. What cloud rights do I have with my active software assurance? And when I say active software assurance, I'm talking about your on-premise licensing with active software assurance. And then kind of moving forward from there, what are my procurement options and restrictions? So that really, in a nutshell, is what I wanted to address in the webinar. Is what on-premise rights do I have with my cloud subscriptions, and vice versa, what cloud rights do I have with my on-premise licenses? Now, getting all of this down can sometimes be quite tricky on slide format. So I did try a variety of ways of doing this, but it has kind of come out as a bit of a little bit of an eye chart. So I will be providing these slides afterwards, and what I'm going to be doing is talking through this. But as you can see there, it's maybe not the best display, but what I wanted to cover off initially are those on-premise use rights with your cloud subscriptions. It's something that everyone's always asking, well, where does my Windows Server cloud? I need to buy that separately if I've got E3. So this is what I want to address with this slide. And ultimately you will get these, and there's potentially better ways with pictures of presenting this, but I thought I would put down the information and you can therefore quite clearly have that with a copy of the slides. So lots of people ask, well, I still want to be able to install the full version of Office, that Office client on my laptop, on my PC and what have you, maybe on your Mac, if you want to be able to do that as well. And the cloud subscriptions do permit that. And I've listed them out here, but it's effectively E3 level and above. So it's Office 365 E3, Office 365 E5, M365 E3, M365 E5. But it is also, and it's worth bearing in mind, we also have these business suites as well. Again, please note, business suites are they have a maximum user of 300. 300 users, so maybe maybe you're not qualified, or maybe this is, but business standard and business premium both allow you to install that office client as well. When it comes to the next element, which is the on-premise servers, which is, well, actually you are running a hybrid, so you're running Exchange on-premise as well as in the cloud, and you therefore need to have an Exchange server on-premise as well. Probably the same with SharePoint, or back in the day Skype for Business, which actually there is going to be a new release of Skype for Business server, and second half of 2021. Certainly surprising, but certainly indicates there's still a significant number of organizations that are still running that Skype for Business on-premise servers. So they're kind of phasing that tradition to Teams, or they're maybe not doing full telephony yet with Teams, and therefore we're still kind of utilizing elements of that Skype for Business server on-premise. So there are use cases, although they are getting few and far between now. So if you have Microsoft 365 E3 or Microsoft 365 E5 via an enterprise agreement, then you are granted, is that the right word? You're not granted because you don't retain the rights. You are permitted to run your on-premise servers for Exchange, for SharePoint, and for Skype for Business without having to buy a separate license for them. That is a benefit of M365 E3 and M365, Microsoft 365 E5 and Microsoft 365 E3, categorically not Office 365 E3. It's part of the M suite, that full suite. Similarly, however, when it comes to the on-premise CALs, so for example, let's look at first at the Exchange CALs for the SharePoint CALs, Skype for Business CALs. Those are absolutely provided by M365 E3 and E5, but crucially also by Office 365 E1, E3, E5. This is the first time we've seen E1 in this makeup as well. Other on-premise CALs are the questions customers are always asking, well, what about my Windows Server CALs? Because if you've got Windows Server, you have to license number, of course, but you still have to buy a Windows Server CAL for every user on-premise, every user or device on-premise. However, just as this is a confirmation that those Windows Server CALs are available via the M365 E3, E5, but also F1 and F3 as well. But crucially, look, only the Microsoft 365 Cloud Suite. Similarly with SCCM and endpoint protection, not part of Office. So really, I suppose the takeaway is if you have Office 365, the only kind of on-premise rights you have with Office 365 would be the on-premise CALs for Exchange, SharePoint, and that Office client as well. Look, finally, I've put on, because it is an on-premise, I finally put on there the Windows 10 Enterprise license as well. That desktop license, that upgrade license. You buy a desktop, it will come with, generally, maybe thin client or Mac or what have you, it will come with Windows 10 Professional, kind of pre-installed as that OEM license, and you effectively upgrade that to Enterprise to get that wonderful stuff like direct access and that virtual desktop access, and that would be part of the Microsoft 365 Cloud Suite. Excuse me. So I apologize about the eye chart, but it's kind of important to cover off what the on-premise CALs and what those server rights are. Please bear in mind, if you're buying M365 E3 via CSP agreement, MPSA, you do not get the on-premise server rights. That's for enterprise agreement customers only. Another wonderful eye chart. Again, I do apologize for this, and I will run through this, so please listen, and you have a copy of the slides afterwards. But I wanted now to cover off the other side of the argument, which is, well, I've got on-premise licensing. What rights do they give me in the cloud? And look, a lot of this is around Microsoft semantics a little bit. We are talking about license mobility and hub, or the hybrid use benefit. And I will just run off from the start there. Microsoft makes statements like the hybrid use benefit is only applicable, is only around for Windows Server, but people often call things like SQL having a hybrid use benefit as well, but it's all semantics. That's called license mobility with SQL, as opposed to Windows Server. So with Windows Server, it is hub, it is the hybrid use benefit. Obviously, Microsoft's naming convention, Surface Hub being something entirely separate and a very large device. We're talking about the Windows Server hybrid use benefit. Basically, if you have got active software assurance on your Windows Server standard or data center licensing, you can save up to 40% of the cost of running those Azure virtual machines. You know, the base cost of those virtual machines can be nullified, and you very much do that as you are provisioning those servers within Azure. It's not something that can be applied retrospectively, so please bear that in mind. Second crucial point that I've noted down here is the difference between standard edition Windows Server and data center excuse me, edition. Now, with regards to how they're licensed, you know, on premise, 2-core licensing up to a minimum of 16 cores or 8 cores per processor. You know, standard and data center licensing the same way, kind of features and functionality relatively the same. And so crucially, the difference is, look, in an on-premise basis, data center edition gives you unlimited virtual machines. Standard gives you 2 virtual machines, but also within the hybrid use benefit, with standard edition, yeah, you can absolutely apply those licenses to cover your Azure machines, but then they can only, you know, either do your on-premise or do your Azure. With standard, it's one or the other. With data center, quite simply, quite straightforward. You may use your Windows Server licenses to cover both, regardless of where you decide that instance is running. Another point worth covering off is obviously the number of cores that you're permitted. So look, each license you have for Windows Server, let's assume that you know that with Windows Server on-premise, you need to license for a minimum of 8 cores per processor, or a total of 16 cores per server. So let's say you had a data center server license for 16 cores. Yes, brilliant, fantastic. You can still cover your on-premise server. You're going to use the hybrid use benefit while you're creating those virtual machines within Azure to, you know, to recognize that 40% saving. And what you can effectively do, you can create one virtual machine up to 16 cores with that license, or alternatively, you can create 2 of 8 cores with that license. Obviously, if you do need more, you want to create bigger machines within Azure, you can stack the licenses. The licenses, volume licensing, you know, they are sold in 2-core packs for that reason. Yeah, the minimum is 16 cores, but you don't have to buy 16 core. You can buy, as I'm sure everybody knows, those 2-core packs, and that's where you get the whole ethos of stacking the licenses. And maybe you're utilizing the 40% saving on that. You know, the hybrid use benefit isn't really going to save you money or cost you money. So what I mean by that is that when these licenses come up for renewal and you're utilizing the hybrid use benefit and you've got those machines running in Azure, you're going to come to the point where you think, well, I'm now going to renew the software assurance or not on these licenses. And you know, the cost to renew the software assurance, you know, licensing software assurance, when it comes to renewing the software assurance, it's about 40 to 45% of the overall cost. So again, look, my point is that when the software assurance comes up for renewal, you know, it's about the same it would be with the saving that you can't get my words out. That the cost to renew the software assurance is give or take about the same cost to which you would be saving over the course of about a 3-year period for those Azure virtual machines. And because it's Windows Server, you're always going to have that on-premise license. There's a lot of value, generally speaking, off the bat. Always is going to be a lot of value in renewing the software assurance on Windows Server, whether that is standard or data center. You will still need to have the CALs, but we kind of covered that in the previous slide as well. Moving on to license mobility, which is slightly different, but also kind of exactly the same, but it is slightly different. That's with SQL. So SQL doesn't have the hybrid use benefit. It's called license mobility with SQL, or BYOL, bring your own license with SQL. The savings up to 55%, but exactly the same ethos. You can kind of use that existing license with software assurance as bring that across into an Azure virtual machine. Certainly don't lose things like DR rights. You know, effectively, the idea being that if you've got that SQL Server, standard or enterprise, covered with software assurance, you get license mobility. Now that license mobility means you can simply move that SQL virtual machine within your own environment, within your own on-premise environment. You know, you can vMotion it frequently, load balancing it to a variety of different hosts wherever it needs to be. That's a benefit of software assurance. That's license mobility. License mobility is also if you want to move to a third-party hoster. If you wanted to, you know, Pulsant data center, something like that, you know, that rights allows you to do that. But similarly, also, if you wanted to move to Azure, exactly the same. You're using that license mobility to move that license. And again, because SQL, it's core for core, you know, 4 core minimum, and that's the number of cores you get within Azure as well. Again, with standard, it is one or the one or the other. So that covers license mobility and the hybrid use benefit. That's again one slide for a very big subject, and you will have a huge estate, and it's really crucial to understand, of course, right sizing of the machines within Azure is such a big piece, but that's not necessarily what we're going to be looking at today. I just wanted to cover what those hybrid use benefits are, but please contact us to understand how that kind of works for yourself. What to do at expiry? So utilizing the from SA discount. Yeah, kind of three options, right? Again, very high level, 3 options. So you've got some software assurance coming up for renewal. We've kind of covered on the server side, you know, there's going to be benefit through hybrid use benefit for Windows Server or SQL. But what I wanted to do here, what if you've got software assurance on your Exchange CALs, on Core CAL, on Enterprise CAL, these traditional suites, you know, the ones that you traditionally buy within an enterprise agreement, is Core CAL. So you would effectively think, well, I can renew these as an on-premise license, or actually I can renew them as a, rather than just renewing as Core CAL or Enterprise CAL, you'd move to Office 365 E3 or E1 or E5. We already know that they then give you those on-premise CAL rights, but then you also get a discount. You get this from SA discount, this from software assurance discount, 10 to 20%. So you would see Office 365 E3 from SA, which, yeah, 10 to 20% discount, provides you all of those CAL rights. So as you can see, Microsoft is really kind of pushing customers with regards to use rights, but also in regards to discounts, to kind of renewing via a kind of a cloud license as opposed to an on-premise license. But don't get me wrong, when that software assurance comes up for renewal, you might choose not to renew the software assurance because you go into a cloud suite with from SA, but you do still retain those perpetual use rights. So you might not want to do any from SA. You might just want to retain the perpetual use rights and continue to sweat the asset, perhaps reharvest it where applicable. You lose the upgrade rights, and you don't have any license kind of mobility, but maybe that's part of the plan anyway. So so you think, well, we're not going to upgrade on premise anymore, but we're just going to draw, you know, perhaps just to sweat what we have for the moment. Which also brings us on to the final point, which maybe you have done that, maybe you've now moved to the cloud. So you've got a bulk of legacy licensing, some perpetually owned licensing. So it's worthwhile exploring the secondhand market for license resale. Again, only available for perpetual licenses, kind of via a brokerage, by demand only. By that I mean simply you might have some licenses retain value, like SQL, you know, like Office, others less so, Exchange Server, you know, and you can get up to kind of 20% potentially of the face value of what you bought those licenses for, depending on the demand, depending on the product, depending on the edition, depending on the version. But we would love to explore that with you, all around leveraging every last piece of value from all the licenses that you've invested on historically. Now, Microsoft have said, and there's various different agreements cropping up, and you can still buy these on-premise kind of licenses via enterprise agreements, MPSA, Open's going later this year, but Microsoft have for a while, to be fair, but they're constantly adding more and more with their new agreement, which is called CSP. I'm still calling it a new agreement. It's been around best part of 2 years now, 18 months. Cloud solution platform implies that it's only cloud licenses. But to be clear, you have 2 options to buy on-premise licensing via a CSP. You can buy the perpetual license, or you can buy a subscription server. There are subtle differences, wonderfully, between the two. I've tried to simplify it here for us. So again, not wanting to be too patronizing, but obviously with the perpetual license, you own that. With the subscription, you don't. Is software assurance included? So can you buy software assurance? Can you renew software assurance through a CSP? No, you cannot. Even on the server subscriptions, which may imply you would have active software assurance, you do not get active software assurance on the servers you buy, procure, rent via the CSP agreement. Payment terms, upfront. Okay, so the first one's upfront, then you kind of get onto 30 days terms. Access to keys via the admin center. You still have full downgrade rights. Although you don't have active software assurance, the subscription does give you new version rights with 30-day cancellation. But this is probably a more useful slide when considering those on-premise use rights. With a service subscription, can a customer use, can it be used on your own premise, on-premise service? Yes to both. But does it provide unlimited virtualization like it would do via an enterprise agreement or via an MPSA, for example? Some subtle differences, no. The reason we say no with Windows Server is simply because Windows Server Data Center is not available via the CSP yet. So it's only Windows Server Standard. And in regards to the license mobility question that we had, we don't have active software assurance. So does that mean we don't get the license mobility? Well, on Windows Server, no, you don't, but then you never necessarily did, but you do still get it on SQL Server. You still get some of these other benefits, DR rights, failover rights, instances such as that. And as you can see there, you can see what the use rights are in regards to your dedicated hosts as well, being available via the generally being available via the server subscription. So really what Microsoft have done here, they've given the CSP and they said, hey, if you still want to go and buy a license perpetually, there you go, use the CSP to do that, buy that license perpetually and then sweat that asset. If you want to actually buy your on-premise licenses in the same way that you procure your cloud licenses on this kind of monthly subscription, the annual subscription type service, then actually, yeah, you can do that via CSP, although there are some restrictions. Generally in regards to Windows Server Data Center, that unlimited virtualization, Microsoft effectively saying, well, you're best off just paying via Azure. We don't want to necessarily be giving you that off the bat. It's not necessarily conducive to you as an organization as well, because you might have you might need more flexibility. Is there reasoning around that? Again, I just want to re-emphasize that your estates are going to be complex and there's going to be a variety of different use cases for us to explore. You should explore in each. I'm just going to take a quick sip, two moments. I wanted to come on to Viva, new product from Microsoft, released at the start of this year. We started to see it appearing on the price list and getting more information throughout April. There is still, there is still more to understand from this product. I think that's fair to say. I don't know if people know much about it or have had a bit of a look at it, but it's effectively Microsoft's employee experience platform. It's kind of it works through teams. And there's going to be 4 key modules. There's going to be Viva, well, there are 4 key modules. There's Viva Insights, Viva Topics, Viva Learning, and Viva Connections. As you say, it kind of works as part of teams. So, look, for example, Viva Insights, it says there it's about balancing productivity and well-being, but really what that means, it's kind of got lots of all this data-driven, privacy-protected insights. So as a user, you're sitting there and it's going to recommend, in theory, productivity improvements to you. So yeah, of course, intended for yourself and your colleagues, maybe intended for managers as well, to kind of identify the opportunities and see how people are working. And yeah, you can address the well-being by doing that, especially people working from home. So maybe you can see certain people working at certain times, or so on and so forth, perhaps not working in the most productive ways. Just ways to improve improve their work-life balance, just improve the way that they work, make them more productive. With topics, that's more around organising your content, just to make it slightly easier to kind of find information and, you know, stay connected with people, put that knowledge to work, and all that kind of buzzwords. Viva Learning is, again, look, it's all within Teams, but it's the idea just to make for users just easier for them to, you know, they're familiar with the Teams platform. They kind of that's kind of part of their workflow, and they're going to have training apps or modules that are going to be available for them to do and incorporate as they're learning, as they're going. And hey, you want to do this, you want to do a quick refresher. So that's the idea around kind of just accelerating their own training. And then finally, we have Viva Connections, which is like a curated, company branded type of, you know, again, just bringing together all these kind of relevant news. It's via Teams, so kind of via, you know, by relevant conversations, you know, other resources, so kind of mix of Teams and SharePoint. It kind of brings it all together. Look, from a licensing perspective, Microsoft's plan is absolutely that in time you will buy the Microsoft Viva suite, like the suite of all kind of 4 products. That's actually available. We think it's probably going to be an add-on to M365. I think we're pretty confident it's going to be an add-on to Microsoft 365. So if you've got Microsoft 365, you know, E3, E5, what have you, there'll be a add-on to just add on Viva at a discounted rate, or kind of buy the full suite. Yeah, or buy each individual SKU, individual component. Interestingly, at the moment, only Topics is available. Literally the only one you can actually kind of buy at the moment, Topics. That one being the that one all around kind of organising your content, finding the information. Just so you know, £3.21 per user per month on the May price list for that one. Other updates and recent news as well. So I think it is worth covering off as Microsoft get towards the end of their financial year, 30th of June. There are going to be some price increases from the 1st of July, looking at around 15%, excuse me, on Intune and on the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. So that's going to be probably the first, well, no, probably about it is the first significant price increase for about was over 36 months, going up to 4 years. So it's due. What is not increasing is the cost of Microsoft 365 E3. For example, Microsoft 365 E3 absolutely includes Intune, absolutely includes EMS, both of which are having that kind of 15-ish% price increase, but Microsoft 365 is not having that price increase. Similarly, the new release of Office in the second half of 2021 is going to have that 10% price increase as well. It is available for commercial preview at the moment. And that's going to be, like I say, that's going to have a 10% price increase. There is going to be a new version of Windows Server 2021. There's not going to be a price increase with that. Obviously, it's still very relevant for all organizations in regards to cloud, hybrid, or making that transition. It is going to be general availability later this year. I mentioned briefly regarding the procurement options and having the perpetual licenses on CSP. More licenses and options are being added every day, every month. Open agreements are being retired. So this is why, you know, open agreements, you'd buy your your perpetual licensing on there, and you would now effectively be able to do that on CSP with some of those restrictions I mentioned earlier. So it is important not to disregard, and it is important to make sure you know what you need from a licensing perspective, and then how to leverage the benefit, whether you're staying on premise, whether you're having a hybrid, or whether you're kind of moving fully to the cloud. And yeah, open value subscription all kind of being retired and certainly gone completely by the end of this year. Excuse me. So that does bring an end to the webinar and what I wanted to kind of run through today. Like I say, in good time and within the half-hour time, and I hope that was of use. And please let me know or contact me on my contact details, or your Ultima account manager or your Ultima licensing specialist. Please contact us if you'd like to know any more. Thank you very much for your time.